The sun burned high over the dry plains and dust hung in the air like smoke. The town of Redstone lay silent except for the restless whinnies of horses and the creak of barn doors in the hot wind. Life moved slow there except on the Carter Ranch, where every heartbeat counted. It was the middle of branding season and the cattle were restless from a recent storm. Among the men working the field was Clara May, a woman whose spirit was tougher than most cowhands around. She had grown up under this land's hard sun, raised by a father who taught her that a rancher's worth wasn't measured by strength, but by courage when things went wrong. That morning, things did go wrong. One of the ranch's youngest workers, Ellie, had been helping mend a fence when a rattlesnake struck from the brush. The girl screamed, fell to the ground, and clutched her leg as blood trickled down her boot. The other hands froze for a split second, fear written across their faces. Snakes were common out there, but a bite could be fatal within hours if the venom spread. Someone yelled for help, and Clara dropped her tools and ran. She found Ellie pale and shaking, the swelling already creeping up her calf. "It's swelling fast," one of the men muttered, panic setting in. Clara knelt beside the girl, ripped a strip of cloth from her own dress and tied it tight above the bite. Her hands didn't tremble. Her voice stayed calm. "Don't move, sweetheart," she said. "You'll be fine. Just keep your eyes on me." The other men looked helplessly around. The doctor was 20 miles away, and the sun was already starting to dip. Every second mattered. Clara took a deep breath and did something that made every man step back in disbelief. She pulled up her dress, tore off another piece of fabric, and bent over Ellie's wound. Without hesitation, she pressed her lips to the swelling and began to draw out the venom. The old ranch hands gasped. It was dangerous, desperate, and something no one expected from her. But Clara didn't care about appearances. She cared about saving a life. Ellie whimpered, tears mixing with dust on her cheeks. "You're gonna be all right," Clara whispered between breaths, her voice cracking. She spit the venom-streaked blood into the dirt and went back again, repeating the process until her own head spun. When she finally leaned back, her face was pale and her breathing was heavy, but the swelling had slowed. The men around her stood in stunned silence. Finally, one of them spoke softly. "You just saved her, Miss Clara." She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and whispered, "No, we did. Now get her inside and fetch cold rags." As they carried Ellie toward the ranch house, the dying light painted Clara's face in gold and red. She stood alone for a moment, watching the sun sink over the horizon. In that silence, the wind carried the sound of distant thunder, the kind that promised another storm. She didn't know it yet, but that day's act of courage would set off a chain of events that would change everything on the Carter Ranch. By nightfall, the storm had rolled in just as Clara feared. The skies opened with a roar, rain hammering the dry land until it turned to mud. Inside the ranch house, lanterns flickered against the wooden walls as Clara sat beside Ellie's bed. The young girl was still weak, but her breathing had steadied. Clara had cleaned the wound, wrapped it in fresh bandages, and sat awake through the hours, refusing to leave her side. Every time Ellie stirred, Clara's hand was there, firm, gentle, reassuring. Outside, the ranch hands worked to secure the cattle before the river overflowed. The wind howled through the valley, rattling shutters and sending the scent of wet earth into the room. Marshal Cole Henderson, the neighboring rancher and the closest thing Redstone had to law, burst through the door, soaked to the bone. His hat dripped water as he looked around, eyes sharp but filled with concern. "Heard about the bite," he said, voice low. "How's the girl?" "She'll live," Clara answered quietly, her gaze still on Ellie. "Barely." Cole stepped closer, kneeling beside her. "Word in town is you sucked the venom out yourself." Clara gave a small, tired laugh. "Word travels faster than the wind around here." "Yeah," Cole said, his eyes softening. "But not many would have done what you did." Clara didn't respond. She didn't do it for praise. In the West, you didn't count your good deeds. You just did what needed doing. Still, his words lingered as the storm raged outside. The silence between them carried something unspoken. Respect, maybe something more. Just as the night began to quiet, a sudden knock thundered on the door. One of the ranch hands stumbled in, panting. "Clara!" The fence line's down near the South Creek. "Cattle are heading for the river!" Clara shot up, exhaustion forgotten. "Get the lanterns and ropes. Cole, with me." They rode out into the storm, horses splashing through the mud, lightning flashing across the sky. The scene was chaos. The creek had overflowed, and dozens of cattle were scattered, lowing in fear as the current threatened to sweep them away. Clara dismounted and ran into the water without hesitation. Cole shouted after her, but she was already knee-deep, pulling at a tangled rope and trying to steer the nearest steer to safety. A branch broke loose upstream and came barreling toward her. Cole lunged, grabbed her arm, and yanked her out of the way just as it crashed beside them. The force knocked them both into the mud, but Clara pushed herself up immediately, soaked and breathless. "We're not losing them!" she yelled. For the next hour, they fought the storm like it was alive, dragging ropes, shouting orders, herding terrified animals back to dry ground. By the time the rain eased, both of them were covered in mud, their muscles trembling from exhaustion. But the cattle were safe. Back at the barn, Cole helped Clara dismount. She stumbled, her strength finally giving out, and he caught her by the shoulders. For a long moment, neither spoke, just breathing hard, rain dripping from their faces. Finally, Cole said softly, "You're one hell of a rancher, Clara May." She looked up at him, tired eyes glinting beneath the lantern light. "Just doing what the land asks of me," she replied. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Something about this land, about that day, had changed her. The bite, the storm, the fear of loss, all of it reminded her how fragile life was out here. And as the thunder faded into the distance, she realized that courage wasn't just about facing danger, it was about choosing compassion, even when the world gave you every reason to harden your heart. And in that moment, under the dim glow of the barn light, the bond between Clara and Cole began to take root. Fragile, unspoken but strong as the plains themselves.